Metzi, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about Vatican City by Mark Millar, written by Mark Millar, illustrated by Berg, a friend of the show. And Vatican City #1, we've just read it, and it's spoiler-free. Synopsis is that millions of vampires are taking over the planet, and they need food, they need slaves, they have a plan, and it involves Vatican City. And we've got some protagonists, some humans that are going to see that those plans aren't realized. We've got Guido, the would-be Swiss guard, who shows up for a job interview, and they, in the midst of things going south really fast, and we've got there's actually a couple other characters whose names is, I think there's like a little girl, there's a nun. There's a really fun Millar-esque cast of people. There's a fun ragtag team of protagonists who are going to try and stop these millions of vampires, and it's a pretty wild, pretty quick ride.
I have a question. So, if Guido is a Swiss guard, then why is he guarding the Pope?
Well, it's his aspiration to move up and do something meaningful.
I was teeing you up there, Matt. I'm so uncultured. You're supposed to come here and educate me that about
there's something fun about reading a Wikipedia article. They've had an arrangement since like 1642 or something.
We're not going to get into how Vatican is like has autonomy.
Can we talk about the administrative structure?
No, what's really fun here actually is this is Mark Millar's take on the zombie apocalypse. And it's got all the trappings and all the tropes that you would expect from one of those storylines, but it's got his unique twist of vampires being responsible, and I'm all for it. Sign me up.
World War V.
Yeah. I did like a lot of the gore and the very quick introduction. Like, we're right in the story right from the very beginning. And he doesn't waste any time. Society's fallen apart. These vampires are gorging themselves on all of humanity. And then we immediately come to, Vatican City and set up this situation where we have this little ensemble of survivors that are going to be standing up to the vampire apocalypse right at the heart of where their objectives lie. And they're all converging onto Vatican City, as we mentioned earlier. But they're devouring humanity in the process. It quickly shows us the Pentagon has fallen, and all of these institutions across the planet are gone. And Vatican City is defenseless as the vampire hordes encroach upon these last few remaining survivors.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, a fourth book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
Yeah, what did you think of the whole this whole turn? I think we're going to get more media like this, by the way, as time goes on. Our historical moment, but these how timely that you have a non-American author talking about the downfall of America and moving the center of power into back to Europe in a way. I don't know if that's conscious or subconscious, but it did stand out as interesting to me. And I think we're going to see more of this in pop culture. I think we're going to see more of the as America
voluntarily recedes.
Yeah, as it changes its role in the world. I think that's a deep. It's a not to get too far into geopolitics, but that is going. I mean, politics and culture, they do relate to each other, and
We're to
and
get
the
more
feelings.
narrative regionalism, I guess. Like people
Yeah.
say, no, I would have tell a story closer to home. Yeah.
So what's interesting is like
Mhm.
America falls in like a few pages, and it's like
Mhm.
it's almost an afterthought. It's like, yeah, America's gone. the vampires ate it.
Yeah,
Now,
it was just kind of used as an excuse to help set the stage. You're right.
Yeah.
right.
Not
yeah.
a single nuke dropped.
Nothing. Yeah, it's just blackout from America. We're in Vatican City. That's where it matters. So that's I'm not even saying this as a point of criticism. I'm saying I think it's interesting that
It's very interesting.
that narrative choice. And like I said, I think it's interesting how it lines up, how it coincides with some other things going on in the world. Like I said, after 9/11, that had a huge impact on comics and storytelling. Superheroes have for years had to deal with the scars left from that. And so it's interesting to see how comics are also dealing with these new disruptions and changes that are happening in the world. So
Well, I think also the Vatican and the papal throne, especially, are interesting story elements to play with here. There's history and there's mystery there. There's a deep hidden secret that's been part of the Vatican all the way back to its founding. And I think it's really appropriate to choose that setting for something like this, where the apocalypse converges on this very historic and deep-rooted secrecy, and that will eventually be revealed. So a lot of great elements at play here. I like the way that Mark has crafted it all together. Moves through it very quickly. Getting into Per Berg's art. So as you mentioned, Matt, Per is a friend of the channel, and we've reviewed quite a number of his books. I think that this is his strongest work that I have seen thus
it's
far.
strong.
Oh, wow.
It's very strong. I have a few points of critique, but before we get into those, I definitely want to point out some of the strengths. His layout work is very strong. He's doing some experimental things. Some of those experiments they almost seem like they're experiments for experiment's sake. So there's a particular sequence where and it's genius in a way, but on the other hand, it's like it was just there. He's doing this thing with a yo-yo, and the yo-yo is like going dropping down through other panels, and so you get this wonderful layout, this definite
Nice.
overlay of space over time, essentially. So it's a wonderful bit of craftsmanship, but it didn't really synergize with anything thematically. So it's Per flexing some artistic muscles, and it's really cool to see those flexes. It's nicer when those flexes synergize thematically, though. So I definitely want to see more of that, but more of it when it can be applied in a thematic way. So that's one thing that does stand out to me. The second thing that and this is more of the critique I have of Per's work with the book, and this might be not just Per, might be Millar's, because the two of them working together. There were a few moments that I think needed to be more highlighted, drawn attention to. I'll give a couple examples. The first example is when they draw attention to the fact that there are millions of vampires surrounding the Vatican City. This is something that in your mind, because it's so huge, it should be seen as huge. So you want to see that as big. And when the one panel that they show that there's millions of vampires, it's actually the smallest panel on the page, and it's like it becomes almost abstract. It's just kind of like a gray mass, but it's in a small tiny panel. And so there's a few moments of clarification where it's in your mind you'd imagine the story beat would be big, and the story ends up kind of doing something different with that. And I think those could be improved upon, but I definitely agree, Well Read, that this is a very strong showing. I definitely think Per is putting some of his best efforts in craftsmanship on display here.
So something I appreciate about Per, as we know from looking at content that Per has written and illustrated, or written and had someone else illustrate, he likes to spend time in scenes and kind of let them protract out, maybe have silent moments, right? Like he's coming from a background where he's been able to like mix his storyboarding experience into his comic illustration experience. A lot of people have done that in the last couple decades to a lot of great success. and he's one of the people been able to do that. This is much more. We're getting straight, as we said, to the action. We're getting straight to every single panel is building a stepping stone towards the conclusion of the issue, right? Like we're not just kind
tight.
of resting.
It's
super
tightly
tight.
constructed.
Yeah. And another thing I like what he's done, there's just more detail in this. Like sometimes, I think sometimes when we work with like big people like this, we get I've been trying to think of the way to describe it. when you get this really amazing gig and it's completely deserved, sometimes you start to second guess your own whimsy, right? Your own I don't want to say instincts, but you start to like try to be more careful in a way. And I feel that his detailing in this is I think he's very expressive still. I'm so glad that he didn't pull himself back and try to be to try to cool off some of his hotter instincts where he gets super dynamic and expressive. This that still gets dynamic, but there's a lot more. It's like up on the big stage, we got to add a lot more detail than we're used to seeing. Maybe that was something that someone else asked for, and so he brought it in, or maybe he brought it in himself, thinking that he needs to. Now that you know what I mean, but that was something I just kind of wondered. Like that's a lot more detail on a face that I'm used to. It was done very well, and in a way, like maybe he's just trying to expand his stylistic range, and this is a fantastic opportunity to do that. But it's funny, like I don't know.
If I may,
struck me as someone who we've all read like 6 or 7 of his books by now, and this is by far the most detailed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of pick that up there for a second because it is simultaneously, and this is something that I'm still wrapping my head around. It is simultaneously detailed and not detailed at the same time in places, and there's this beautiful double page spread of the Vatican City, and it's gorgeous. It's very, very. It's a wonderful kind of
it's
set
never
piece.
fussy. It's not like he's leading, so it doesn't feel like he's super anxious to just add detail for detail's sake. You never get that impression.
So what I was saying is that he's got quite a bit. He's clearly referencing some some information about the city, the layout of it, and there's clearly like when he's drawing the basilica, there's clearly some very interesting details that he's putting on there, even with light and reflection. So I can definitely see that he spent some time putting in detail of to make this dome reflect light in a way that is very it has a certain level of detail to it. So he's definitely paying attention. But then the choices he's making to completely gloss over detail. So when you look at that spread, there are parts of the buildings where it's like, no detail here. This part of the building, quite a bit of detail, including I think some very meticulous detail on lighting. But
there's
other parts of the building,
a hierarchy with detail.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what makes it interesting. You get it's detail and then the absence of detail at the same time, and that's something that I think is actually a hallmark of what Purr does in his comics. When he wants to draw your attention to an aspect of the artwork, it's like he'll go in like with a microscope or definitely go in with magnifying glass at the very least. But then if there's something that's not as important, then he just broad strokes that, and I think that it's definitely something that it's an acquired taste for a lot of people. A lot of people will glance at Purr's work. It can be very binary. People will either fall in love with it immediately or be turned off by it. But I do encourage readers to give it a chance, especially if it's not your cup of tea, because there's definitely a lot of nuances I think that you can find that will reward you.
A small little detail just to underscore that. I mean, he's using things that people might not be used to, or they will be if they're from our circles reading his books over the years. But it's an alternative to we like it in film when there's like selective focus, where things are blurry that shouldn't be as in much detail. And this is a way of doing that without actually like photoshopping a blur in the background, although that can be done too, and he does it in here as well. But sometimes So, yeah, selective detail is a classic tried and true way of kind of bringing your eye through the panels. It's definitely a pro gamer move with comics, and frankly is often a lost art with a lot of professional comics, from the mainstream and in indie spaces. So it's I always find it refreshing when he
Yeah.
introduces it into his books.
Yeah, and I agree with your point, Matt, that stylistically, I think he did laser focus a lot of his
Yeah.
signature representations. I see the kinetic energy that he does so well. He projects it onto the page where you feel a lot of the motion, and everything is very intense. And it kind of just I don't know, it screams off of the panels. Some of the action sequences that he's capable of delivering, but again, it is a little restrained. You mentioned about the absence of the whimsy, and I'm thinking about like some of his earlier work, where we have the more animated faces, where they're not quite human, but they're amongst humans, and there's some indulgent moments where it's a little bit signature narwhal. We're gonna
There's always the
go.
guy with the big nose, right?
Yeah,
Like where's the
yeah,
big nose guy? I'm still looking
exactly. So he did decide to train his attention here to make sure that he served the story and delivered on something that has that visceral impact of the intensity of a vampire apocalypse that is becoming of the script that Mark Millar had delivered to him to bring to life. So I do think that he was very calculated in his approach without sacrificing any of his true artistic expressionism that he's known for.
It's a good thing too. If you're an artist and you can kind of tweak your style depending on who you're working with or what the needs of that story are, that's a testament to your skill. If you only can bring one mode and only one mode, you're going to be limited. The fact that he can, kick back a little more in different works, but for Mark Miller's, he's laser honing in a particular way what his capabilities are. It's definitely it is a compliment to his overall craftsmanship.
It's polished without being, if it could just be a lesser illustrator would polish this in an unfocused manner because they were nervous or hesitant, and this is polished in a very focused way that does serve the story. He polishes it in places that bring clarity to the action, which is really hard to do. And there's a heck ton of action, and so that's something that someone does who has a really cool head on their shoulders.
One question before we jump into final thoughts. So, is it ever made clear how exactly the vampires are able to walk in the daytime? We're so used to seeing these events, with zombies, and we don't think that zombies are nocturnal, but vampires are. And there's a significant scene here where the vampires take off their costumes and they're in the moonlight, and so they can now revel in their, in their path of destruction. But we do have some moments where they're in the daytime. Am I mistaken there?
So they're in the daytime, but they're wearing these outfits that completely cover all
outfits.
Yeah, I think and it's funny because I think it was a TV Tropes has the all our vampires are different. Everyone's got their own unique vampire rules. From this issue, it seems that the vampire rules are obviously sunlight's bad, but if you cloak yourself in dark clothing and light doesn't penetrate any of that, then you're good. They obviously can't enter into the holy areas of the Vatican. This is a very Catholic story, which fits Mark Miller's background. Yeah. And vampire is a very Catholic monster in a lot of ways. So it's very fitting. And there's another angle there to kind of explore. The zombie is sort of the vampire with all of the religion removed. And so this is taking the undead back to its roots as being a sort of a satanic thing. The undead was originally there's a whole bunch you can dive into about, like, the inverse of, the resurrection, essentially. The fact that it is the opposite. It's meant to be a mirror demonic image of what Christ stands for when he gives you when he gives you eternal life.
Wow.
So I don't know. I'm actually, one thing that actually makes me more interested in reading this is knowing that Mark Millar is Catholic, strongly so, and the fact that he
Really?
is
Wow.
I believe so, and he's choosing to explore this issue. And a lot of weaker writers, so for example, Warren Ellis, when he wrote Castlevania, he removed all the religious spirit from it and he made it into garbage. And so to see someone of a very strong religious persuasion take up the vampire storytelling, I'm actually kind of excited to see where he's going to take
refreshing.
it. It is
Yeah.
very, very refreshing. So that alone has me kind of intrigued, because I think there might be something very interesting that Mark might have to say about it.
Final thoughts, guys. Matt C.
Yeah, it's you guys brought up, I actually wasn't tracking this, of like all the zombie aspects that are present here, and I was trying to think of what I felt like I was looking forward to seeing and maybe felt like I was missing narratively, and that was all these people are just getting their heads chopped off and just getting slaughtered, and nobody's like just being sucked and converted. You know what I mean? But maybe that's a trope that you could do without. I don't know. I still have questions. I suppose like everyone just getting chopped to pieces by samurai ninja vampires is actually kind of more Miller-esque than than other alternatives. So I'm still kind of I'm very impressed. Clearly the art is really doing great, fantastic things, and I think the story. We've read several Miller works on this show, and I think what he's bringing feels really strong. It feels really clean. It feels very direct and lean, and
It's a tighter
it
story.
knows what it wants to tell. Yeah, and it's not getting fussy in kind of side paths just to kind of pad out a particular story, which, I mean, Miller typically doesn't do that. He usually goes he leans straight into the most, he finds the nugget that he wants to get at, and then he leans at it the most extreme ways possible, which is often, it can be divisive, but it can bring pretty interesting stories out. And this just feels so simple that it's actually really, like we said, refreshing to just see a clear, direct vision from these two. There's just no distractions, and it's bringing the best out of both of them, I think. So really strong recommend.
Twitless.
I definitely like this way better than Nemesis, which was like the last Miller piece we read. I think it suffers a little bit, just again, not to just, only say positives. I think it suffers a little bit from first issue syndrome. I think the story almost overplayed its hand a little bit. There is a significant reveal at the end, and again, if you're interested, pick this book up. And I feel like that reveal went too far. It's like, hey, you have a story, don't play too many of your cards in issue 1. So I think there was a little bit of that awkward dance of, if you don't play enough of your hand, people won't pick up issue 2. But if you overplay too much of your hand, is there enough interest to pick up issue 2? So I think there was an awkward dance with how much of the story you want to reveal. I think a few other minor moments would have been more clear if, like I said, if they were highlighted better in the panel. So like I said, there's a few choices that I think can be improved. So I'm not saying it's perfect or anything, but a definite recommend. I think Per and Miller, they make a really interesting team, and this particular pitch for a story is something I'm very interested in, and to see where they take it. So check out Vatican City.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.